try to join.
Now we're coming to great, recording is happening, but we're coming towards the end of this preparation series, and the Commission on the Status of Women is happening in a short 3 weeks. But this space was really for us to connect with one another, to start to think about the issues that will be raised at the Commission itself, and to support one another's engagement during the Commission. So many of you have engaged in the CSW before. For many of you, it's also your first time. So we're wanting to also help support one another to engage effectively. This year is also the 50th anniversary of NGO CSW. And so we've put together a little kudo board, which we will link in the chat, which is for you to share your vision for a gender equal world, or some favorite memories or activities that you shared with NGO CSW over the year. So you can add photos and comments and quotes there. Also, one more thing to add is that as we're preparing for the Commission on the Status of Women, we have selected some global mentors who are advocates and very experienced veterans of engaging at the United Nations and at the Commission of the Status of Women. So we've had one already, but we will have a networking session during the Commission itself. It will be on the second week on Wednesday, the 23rd of March, from 12 to 1 p.m. And you can join on the Remo platform. And this is really an informal engagement. It's an opportunity to go up to these mentors, to introduce yourself, to share a little bit about your work, and to ask them for any of their tips and wisdom and insight as you've all been engaging at the Commission. So we've done one to kind of prepare for the CSW, and one kind of midway towards the end of the CSW, where you can engage with these mentors and ask for their input and feedback and just experience of what it's been like. So those are my few updates. I will turn over to Devin to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I was literally just typing my little introduction in the chat. My name is Devin. I am the program manager at NGO CSW, and I'm also one of the 3 YLYP co-chairs. Yeah, good to see you all.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Safira, for those updates. We'll be hearing from both Devin and Safira shortly as well. But to kick things off, let's talk about male allyship. We have some fantastic allies with us on the call who we will meet shortly. But in a nutshell, what is male allyship? In its simplest definition, a male ally is anyone who identifies as a man who is willing to advocate and speak up in support of gender equality. And this is not an element of our movement that is nice to have because we want to be inclusive, but it is in fact essential. This is one example of a case study which showed that men who are engaged in gender inclusion programs in their organizations, they see 96% of those organizations see progress as compared to 30% organizations where men are not engaged. So that's one example of how male allyship really adds value, and that is essential to accelerating progress on gender equity. And a significant part of this progress and this value is because we live in a patriarchal world. Men hold power in this world, men hold privilege, and only by having allies in this movement who are willing to use their privilege to support gender equity and share and redistribute power can we see sustainable progress. And there are different stages of allyship, and many of our colleagues and friends on this call and beyond may find themselves on this different spectrum. So these stages include having not started, which means having not considered becoming an ally. The second would be an emerging ally. Third would be establishing, where our allies are practicing and willing to set an example with respect to the work they're doing. And the final is reinforcing, which means utilizing their privilege to renegotiate and share power as allies. So these are the various spectrums where allyship can really fall with respect to the gender equity movement. And this is one example of these stages. There are many, many other nuances as well. But we would love to hear from all of you here on the call. If you identify as a man, where do you find yourself within the spectrum? And if you identify as a woman, where do you see the allies around you? Where are they on with respect to this allyship? We'll just take a moment. The poll is in front of us and see what the results are. Do we have the results of the poll? Where is the spectrum? Where are we falling?
Can you see the results?
I think we do. I hope everybody can see it. It's really interesting. A lot for most of the people on the call, they consider their own allyship or the allyship of people identifying as male around them as emerging, which means they are considering or in the early stages of implementing allyship. So 42% of people on the call said that's where they find themselves in. Or second, which is 33% of establishing, where our allies are actually practicing and willing to set an example with their work. So that's great. We are somewhere in the middle of this movement and being and becoming and emerging as better allies. So that's fantastic to know. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And next, we're going to move into speaking to our allies. If you can move to the next slide, where I think we have our allies listed out. Yeah, we have some wonderful speakers on the call with us today, including Carlos, who's the founder of the Movement of Creating Citizens, Richard, who's an action learning group lead at Yield Hub and a youth advocate, and Fred, who's the executive director of the Man Up campaign. So we will be shortly turning to these allies with a few questions. But before we turn to our panel, I'd first like to turn it over to my fellow co-chairs, Devin and Safira, who are, of course, young women within this gender equity movement. And I'd love to hear from you both about why do you think male allyship is important, and what have you experienced in your personal life or in your careers that has emphasized the importance of male allyship?
I can go first. Excuse me. So I think the main thing for me is, and I think we see this a lot in the different, related to different issues within the general gender equality or activist fields. But I think the most important reason for just men to be allies, but also just to be involved in these conversations, is because when they're not, we're kind of just talking to ourselves. And yeah, so like we need to be able to reach out to the people who might not be allies yet, or might not be as knowledgeable or educated on the different issues surrounding gender equality and women's rights and empowerment. So I think like that's really the like foundation of the importance of male allyship. And it's really important that we work with men and boys and male allies to shift that societal and cultural misogyny, really. And yeah, and like unfortunately many men and some women all over the world really only listen to men in power. So it is really important to have male allies and people who are on our side and are able to kind of talk and introduce these ideas to the people who aren't necessarily in our field and in our bubbles. So we're not just talking to ourselves about this, but that we're really trying to expand to the people who really need to hear these things. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Deb.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Safira.
I was going to jump in, Saida. I wanted to build on some of the things that Devin described. And for me, what's at the heart of the gender justice work is, an imbalance in the world. Like we are really striving to reconstruct the world together. There are so many things, whether it's systems and structures or culture that has for generations been steeped in this injustice and has for generations oppressed women. But to be able to reshift those relationships and redesign those systems, we need to work shoulder to shoulder with everyone, with all of humanity, and with those who in particular have constructed these systems, and also who continue to benefit in certain ways from these systems and structures that are patriarchal in nature. And I think we are seeing women stand up and try to make this change, but we also need the men to kind of work with us and to help redesign it, because while men do benefit in some ways from the current system, there are also many ways where men also suffer, and they're not able to express their full selves or bring their full potential and personalities and skills. So the world is also losing from the way that men are constrained by the current system too. And there's a quote that I really love that describes, as long as women are prevented from attaining their highest potential, men are also unable to achieve the greatness that might be theirs. So we're all suffering from this system of oppression. And there's no single country in the world, no place in the world that can say that they have achieved true gender equality. So this is something that we all have to learn about together. It doesn't matter who we are. We have to learn about what embodying justice and equality and equity looks like in our society. And I think when we do, there's this element of co-liberation, like we are all working together to build societies and to build, families and relationships and institutions and business and school systems and educate. There are so many things that, co-liberation, I love it too. I love the concept too, but we all need to play our part, every one of us. And so that's why I think kind of collaborating with men and opening up these opportunities to not only be in conversation, but to act together, to build consensus and actually do things together. So I'll hand back to Saida.
Thank you, Devin and Safira. Yeah, that was fantastic. And I also love the term of co-liberation, because the gender equity issue is to do with both genders and everybody else who falls on the spectrum. And we have to be cognizant of those intersectionalities that harm us and perpetuate these negative stereotypes and negative impacts for both men and women. And when it comes to building that gender equitable world, we're not going to get there unless we get there together, unless we work in consensus together. So absolutely agreed. Thank you for sharing that, both of you. And next, we're going to dive into a few questions with our fantastic allies on the call. And one of our first questions is essentially asking our allies, what are some of their personal experiences that motivated them to think about gender equity? So I'm going to turn it over to our allies to quickly maybe introduce themselves and let us know what motivated them to start thinking about gender equity. So Carlos, Richard, and Fred, you have the floor.
I don't know if I go first. You tell me.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure. First of all, hi everyone. It's good to see you all again. It's been ages, but you all look so good as always. First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be talking about male allyship and its importance into the gender equality movement. For those who don't know me, my name is Carlos Infante. I'm from Venezuela. I'm the founder and director of the movement Creative Citizens, in Spanish, Movimiento Creando Ciudadanos. But today I'm just an ally, and let's talk about that. So my experience getting into male allyship actually started really, really early in my life because I grew up without a man figure in my life, which my mother was a single mother for both of us, my older sister and myself. And since my house was full of women, my grandmother, my mother, and my older sister, I actually grew up in a feminine environment. So that it doesn't matter that you're a man. If you're in a feminine environment, you have to see the problem. I mean, if you don't see it, you gotta be crazy, to be honest. And growing up, I had to experience how my grandmother, my mother, and sister were treated really badly because they're women. They were sexually harassed. We could be walking on the street in a public street with a little kid like me, and they would be like calling my mother or my sister names, like hot, sexy, hey you, some things like that, and in the middle of the streets, like in the public. It's not, and people that doesn't even know us. And a part of that, I have to see my mother being a single mother in a society full of patriarchy was very hard too, because she have to fight her way to success. And she did. My mom is a super rock star, but it wasn't easy. Same as my grandmother, being a woman who was so free to be herself in a society where women should have be quiet and silence and be in the kitchen and be just taking care of the family. My grandmother was not like that. My grandmother was a free spirit, and she made the society know she was free and that she wanted to be free. But that unfortunately that make that society see her as a bad woman, as a conflictive woman, as a woman who doesn't care about her family, but she did care about her family. She did her best to give my mother and my uncle the best education she could. Even when sometimes my grandfather wouldn't like give her money for the family, for the house. So growing up, watching those kind of things, you kind of think there is something wrong with society, actually. Why do men treat women like this? And that's when my allyship started. While watching all this experience of my mother, my sister, and my grandmother, and how they were hurt by men and women, just because we live in a patriarchy society, actually make me believe that there is something wrong with society that we must change. And I have said this before in your events, but I will say it again. I'm the kind of I'm the kind of human being who thinks if I see something wrong and I do not do nothing about it, who will? I mean, I know there is like millions of people out there who are fighting the good fight, but I'm the kind of guy who thinks if I see something wrong and I don't fight for it, I don't fight for it because it's right, because it's my moral obligation to do so, who will do it? If I don't stand up, who will do it? I don't know. I have the opportunity to be here and to share this experience with you. I have this platform, thanks to GLGP and Said and Safira and Deva and all the members of the GLGP community. I have this platform. So if I didn't stand up, maybe I wouldn't be here talking to you. Maybe you wouldn't hear my story and the story of my grandmother, my mother, and my sister. So it's important for us to understand that we do have a fight to do, and we have a platform. So between more we do the fight, more platform we will have, more people we will reach. And between more people hear our stories and hear why we think it's important for us to be allies, I think that's the key for what Safira and Devan was saying before, this collaboration. I mean, that's the key word after all, collaboration between all of us as human beings, to be honest, just to see each other as human beings, not just see gender, but actual human beings who needs and deserve respect from each other. And that's all. And that's my answer. Sorry for talking too much.
Carlos, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences and bringing the humanity piece of it, of why is it essential, again, for all of us to be working together. Richard, if you can hear us, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Saida. I'm very happy to join you all. My name is Richard. I'm from Ghana, but currently I'm based in Brussels. I work as an Action Learning Group lead for the new Yield Hub. I started this role barely 2 weeks ago. And previously, I was a youth officer for the Young Expert Tech for Health. And also, I do know Saida because I also was part of the Global Health Corps Fellowship Program. And so I worked in the United States for a period of 13, 14 months with the PAI as an advocacy associate on primary healthcare. And so I'm definitely glad to be joining the discussions today. Back to the question, why is male allyship very important, and the personal experience? I guess for me, growing up in Ghana, maybe we all know a lot of, when it comes to women's reproductive health and rights, which is primarily my field of work. And in a country like Ghana and a lot of African countries, a lot of young girls and women go through, a lot of challenges when it comes to teenage pregnancy, unsafe abortions, and all the social stigma they face when they want to access reproductive health rights, and services. But again, who are those, causing some of these problems? We always look at it from the female perspective, but who is making the girls pregnant in the communities? It's the males. Who is, why are they having unsafe abortion? Because some young man is not accepting responsibility. Why are they afraid to go to, the health facility to seek health services? Because the same society, including men, are stigmatizing against women who are open about their sexuality. And so for me, being in this space at an early age, I was fortunate. I could have also been one of those, young men who would not identify as an ally and will continue, to also cause more harm. But I was quite fortunate at an early stage in my life, or let's say when I was a young person, to be part of a youth advocacy group called Curious Minds. And so I received a lot of training and capacity building opportunities from UNICEF, from UNFPA, and it really made me understand, some of the challenges and the fact that, for a lot of women and girls, the gatekeepers to their lives could either be their boyfriends, their brothers, husbands, and these are people who have a strong opinion on how they should live their lives. For instance, you see a woman who is not wanting to take a family planning method or contraception because the husband says no. Or a woman who is getting pregnant even though she does not want it because the husband says, I want a child. And so definitely this takes to mind that then we need male allyship, because a lot of the men do not understand and do not, begin to think that their decisions, their, thinking affects women in many different ways. And so for me, I guess that's mostly my experience for continuing to be a male ally, and then also being able to occupy a space where I have the position and privilege and power to remind my colleague males that we contribute a lot to some of these issues. And so don't look at it only from the female perspective, which is important. And so I will not say I'm supporting women and girls. I am supporting, but eventually the result comes back to me, it comes back to society. And so we the men should see that if we become allies and we continue to support the cause, that means that we are contributing to, a better society, and we are definitely making life better for everyone. So yeah, mostly that has been my experience, and I continue to be happy to be in the space and to share my experience and to support whenever I can.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you particularly for emphasizing those early training and resources that shaped your perspective, as well as the importance of recognizing who are the gatekeepers in society and how they can continue to renegotiate and share power. Fred, now I'll turn it over to you.
Hello. Yes, to be an ally is not an automatic thing for a man, no matter whether you're a good man, which most men maybe aspire to. It actually has to be a conscious effort. My mother was the primary breadwinner at our house. She was the primary influence as far as parenting went. My grandmother, I think, was in the Women's Temperance League, and they were famous for working on suffrage and civil rights for women. But at the same time, it takes a personal effort to kind of change the indoctrination that you're subject to. I was acutely more sensitive to race when I was young. I grew up in Iowa. My mom is from the Philippines. So even just a subtle, change from kind of the Irish, Swedish, German stock there, there were very few minorities, and you could, feel the difference. So I was able to understand that. I was able to understand the struggle of race a little bit more. But of course, had these great role models as women. But when I went into college, I was going to be a doctor, and that's a place of privilege in a certain sense in a society. And when I was going to school, there were many less women doctors. I think the medical profession is one where there are more doctors, and there was always an establishment of nurses as the role. My mother was a pharmacist who ran her own pharmacy when she came. But there was a real change in college. I was in with the sports, in the sports dorm, and I was with all the top team in the nation as far as wrestling went. And there wasn't really much difference physically between me and these other guys, but they kind of had this chip on their shoulder in a certain sense. They really had to win because basically their egos were actually quite fragile. And so I'd find myself wrestling all the time. But I had these roommates from Chicago, a little bit more cosmopolitan. And when we had to take a gym class, as a college requirement, they actually, they took this all-male ballet class. And then I came upon that requirement. I said, well, maybe I'll try that too. But I was playing the piano, and something that I think I consciously started to withdraw from when I was around 13 and stopped playing because I wanted to play outside and be more like the other boys. And it's found in studies that men behave the way they think other men think that they should behave. So I went to this ballet class. Then and that was all male. But when I would look in the rooms, this ballet class existed because there were almost no males in the dance department, because that's a gender role that, in the United States, a place where a man couldn't be. He couldn't express his masculinity through dance. So I started to shift towards out of this doctor field for a number of reasons. But I felt as I started to dance and decide maybe I might do painting or dance as part of my journey, I felt my future kind of become from something very certain to dropping away and being very amorphous and tenuous because of making a different type of choice. So I think, we do have these gender roles so coded into society. My daughter was 5 years old, and she was winning on the soccer field against the boys because she had a little coaching from me. And they asked her, if she was really a girl. So it starts very early on. And so we really have to kind of consciously or find this moment. And then we have to actually learn. It's like unwrapping an onion to be able to see the construct and intersectionality and learn some of this vocabulary. But I think that there won't be, true gender equality until, we have a lot more male allies. So Man Up campaign, I've been asked at times to change the name of that. Its intention is a hip hop term from hip hop culture, Man Up campaign. But I find, in the United States, it means a certain thing. It's fairly misogynist, but around the world, we kind of defined it as stopping gender-based violence. So I think, it also gives us kind of cover. I have been very successful at gaining, young men from around the world, and they feel, that they can be part of this campaign. But really, in every place, I think the musical Hamilton says it, is that, you want to be in the room where it happens. And there's a lot of rooms where it happens where women and minorities aren't there. And we need to get the ratios up to at least 30% of the non-dominant groups, or else, it just, these structures just perpetuate themselves.
Thank you for sharing that, Fred, especially about the part about defining what toxic masculinity is and how it can show up in different forms, and about redefining what man up can truly mean globally. So thank you for sharing that. And our next set of questions is related to what was already shared here, but we would love to hear more about how our allies at a personal and professional level what have they done to understand the socioeconomic issues that are faced by women, and would also love to hear a specific example of where they've utilized their privilege as people identifying as men and stood up as an ally. So opening up the floor for that. Carlos, would you like to jump in?
Sure thing. First of all, I want to congratulate Richard and Fred. I think the work is really amazing. We need actually that in the world. We need more work like Richard and Fred. And that kind of a knowledge, like I see a problem, I stand up for it and I go for it and try to change it. I think that's the kind of knowledge we really need in this fight. So it's really great to share the space with both of them. And to answer the question, so as a college friend or leader, what have you done to understand the socioeconomic issues that are faced by girls and women? There is something that it's called feminization of poverty. I don't know if I said it right in English. In Spanish, is feminización de la pobreza. That's about studying why there are so many, for example, here in Venezuela, why there are so many single women in Venezuela in a state of poverty. Like it can't be just casuality. Like it just didn't make up like that. Most of the poor people in Venezuela are actually women with little kids. No, and when studying that, I realized that there is actually something related to the patriarchy, and it's the fact that when a young woman, ends up pregnant, the men, if they're in a socioeconomic status that is really low, I mean, that's poverty, the man is often related to leave the house and leave the woman alone with the children. So they don't have one children only, they have 3 and up. For example, here in Venezuela, 3 and up. So imagine being poor and also have the responsibility to take care of 3 to 4 to up to 6 children. That's crazy. That's nuts in a lot of ways. So when we were studying that, we realized that there is a feminization of poverty in the way that they don't find jobs easily because they don't have ways to someone to take care of the children. They don't have the time to study, to end up studies, to go to college. So they don't have a degree. They don't have time to find a proper job that pays them what they deserve because they need the time to take care of the children. So when we see this structure, we see that everything is boiled up to actually push down when this exact situation. So they don't have any other choice to work or to win a dignified pay to take care of their family, the children, the mother, the grandmother, the grandfather. They're like a big family living in one little house, and all of them are poor. So there's so many mouths to feed, no money at all. What do you do? This is when we see women goes to prostitution, goes to selling drugs, goes to do a lot of unimaginable things. but it's because of poverty, it's because of the situation, it's because everything happened to them. And of course, society has built this structure, so it happens that way. So we were studying this in the really, really poor neighborhoods of Venezuela. We will see that most of women have 3 to 4 children that are all alone, most of the children from different fathers, and society blames them, you know? Like, why did you get pregnant from him? Why did you have another children if you didn't have the money? And like, no, that's not the problem. Okay, that's not the problem. That's not her fault. I mean, we are talking about different men who have decided to leave the woman and the children. Why we are not blaming them? We are blaming the woman. The man is not taking part on this. The man is living, I mean, not a luxury life, but at least he doesn't have the responsibility to feed 4 children. That's something that we have to think about, you know? And when we see that, we have working from many organizations in the formation of people, you know, and society in general, to make them understand there is a feminization of poverty exists, it's real, and it's dangerous for society. Again, we must understand something. If women are most of the 50% population of the world, if we don't take care of it, that 50% will grow up just to be poor and poorer and poorer. And many less women will have opportunities to go to college, to get a degree, to get a PhD. We have to take care of that. We have to see the reality and destroy the structure that actually pushed them down. So in Venezuela, that's what we have trying to do by trying to give free education to society in order to reconstruct the society, for example, in Venezuela. So that's one of the things that we do in Venezuela. We go to the poor neighborhoods, we talk to the family, we talk to the woman, most of them. And something that is really perturbing is that every time that we go to this poor neighborhood, we talk to these women, they always have a background history of sexual harassment, always. They have been sexual harassed since they were child. Some of them were sexually harassed and raped when they were 5 years old by a grandfather, by an uncle, by a cousin. They were raped 15 years old by a stranger, by a best friend, by a teacher. I mean, that's very disturbing. And sometimes they say it in such a normal way, like, yeah, I was raped. Yeah, I was raped like 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah, I was raped. Like, and you don't see them dealing with the trauma because they know they can't deal with it. Like, they don't have time for that. So that's how bad it is. And that's why we need to attack it right directly on it, because it's something that in the future can be a huge problem. I mean, it is a huge problem right now. Now, imagine it to the next generation in like 10 years, in a decade, something like that. So we need to take care of that now. And that's why my movement, my organization, many other organizations are working really hard to educate people and the state to understand that this is an issue that we need to confront.
Thank you, Carlos, about sharing about your work with respect to the feminization of poverty and the distribution of labor when it comes to reproductive health and the responsibility of who gets to take care of children. It's really essential and important. Thank you for sharing that. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Richard to share some of his experiences.
Thank you very much. I'm just juggling a bit in between some other notes, but with my experience, I would say at a more professional level, for instance, through my work, I have been able to, read a number of research documents on the gender gap when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights. And again, I focus there because that's my area of experience. And there are a number of revealing factors, why, women and girls are not able to attain certain height or have the same achievement as boys in certain domains. And for instance, I begin to realize that growing up as a boy, I would be allowed, I mentioned Curious Minds, one of the organizations that I benefited from training and capacity building from. I would be allowed as a boy to, attend programs and trainings and benefit from capacity building, and nobody will question why I shouldn't go. But that wouldn't be the same for a girl. The parents may be concerned that I cannot let you alone go and attend an event, and your safety. There are a number of factors that even at an early age prevent girls my age from having the same benefit that I have because of socio-cultural factors. Again, within even when it comes to the advocacy space, again, we realize that it's not the same. Boys may be confident and exactly say, I want this, I want that. It's not the same for the women. It's not the same for the girls. They may not always be upfront. They are not always to say exactly that, okay, I want to be part of this process. I want to engage. And so again, that is another challenge that through my work, I have come to understand. And more importantly, when it comes to even making advocacy, you see that more men tend to look at it from, yes, I'm in the advocacy space, I'm passionate about the issue, but I look at it from a more professional point of view. They are quickly looking at how they want to advance professionally. And whereas maybe sometimes you take the issue of girls, women, they are really passionate about the issues and they want to make change, and they may not necessarily also think about it in a professional way. So if you look at the experiences, you ask a man and a woman may be more there because of maybe some personal experiences she has gone through with regards to a specific issue or topic, and so she is there to make a change. And then the men also come through, yes, we want to make a change, but we also look at it from a more professional point of view. So my summary is that you see men advancing more in the field of sexual reproductive health and right. I mean, as in when we are growing up in our teenage ages, taking up different opportunities, being more aggressive and assertive than their female counterparts. And so this realization also means that then we have to pay special attention and particular attention when it comes to girls within our communities, when it comes to giving them opportunities, when it comes to supporting them as well. And so for me, now that I find myself in a position of like as a youth officer, like in my previous role, anytime we had to get a young person to speak, I would quickly demand with my authority, I would want a young female to be there to speak, because it's just easy even without asking, it's just easy for any of the young men to say, well, I'll volunteer to speak. Whereas maybe the female counterpart is contemplating if I can do this, if I want to do this, but they can't actually do it. It's just, understanding that these are the reflections and thinking she's going through and then supporting them. And so I guess for me, also allies means that men we support, but then we also know when to step back and leave the space for the women to take over. We can support as allies in terms of also galvanizing support from our fellow men. But when it comes to advocacy and discussing the real issues, we should not also take the center stage, because it's the women who are also most affected. So again, that is another way of also supporting as an ally. I remember in 2017, 2016, I don't know the exact year, I was at the UNGA with support from an organization. And then we were in different sessions, and they always wanted me to be the one delivering the statement. And I had my colleague who was female and came up to me and said, Richard, I also want to deliver one of the statements, but I feel I cannot do it. And I understood why they always came to me, because they give us 5 minutes and I will speak eloquently. I can deliver the speech within 5 minutes. And so my donors were like, Richard, do it. But I knew that my colleague can also do it, and she's better at doing it. And so in that, I stepped back and I told them I would want her to take the space and deliver the statement. And she did that beautifully. Of course, it's not a matter of someone could have the skill to deliver a speech in 5 minutes, but also as a man, I know when to step back, knowing that what I'm going to read is an experience which is lived by a female. And the fact that I'm a project officer and I was part of the project does not mean that I take the voice from someone who can deliver it with her own experience. And so as male allies, in terms of how we also use our privilege, I think this is how we should also continue to use our privilege to sensitize other colleagues that yes, we do have the time, we do have the power to be in certain positions, but it's important to also know when to step back and also put others at the front to deliver. And I think that's something very, very important that we have to be intentional about doing. And for me, gladly, I'm in a position where I can invite people for a seminar or webinar or whatever, and I'm always deliberate about that. Sometimes I smile in my head and I say, no, I have been there before as a young man, where I would always say, I would volunteer, I want to be there, because somehow we are assertive and then we push, and it's not the same. And so I guess this is how, as male allies, we continue to support, but also to always talk to our colleagues to know that we should also be intentional about these processes, because the genders, historically, socioculturally, women are discriminated against. Society would just not allow the woman to speak up, even if she wants to speak up. And just to sum up and summarize on this, I realized at one point, as a reproductive health and rights advocate, I can go and talk about contraception, sexual rights, my freedom, and nobody will look at me with certain funny eyes or anything. But if my female colleague should express her sexuality, people begin to view her in a certain, with particular lenses. They begin to become aggressive or even violent or perceive them in certain ways. And so it means that some of us in the space, we are not affected socially or culturally because we speak our mind because we want to speak it. But the women, it's a different perception. So when they are not stepping up to take up certain leadership roles, it doesn't mean they don't want to. It's maybe because of how they express themselves, and so people see them in different ways and direct more attacks on them, or even assume that because they are sexual and reproductive health and right advocates, then they love sex, or just let me advance unnecessary advances towards. And this is something that our female colleagues experience. And so again, it's always important that we are intentional and understand that we all have different perspectives, but different lived experiences. And so it's important to be allies and support, but when it's important, also take a step back and allow the female voices who are essential to the process to take the center stage.
Thank you for sharing that, Richard, and for building up the layers of how access to opportunity can really affect the confidence of girls and women in this space. It can affect whether they feel like imposters in spaces of power, and how it is essential then for allies to step forward when the opportunity allows, but then knowing when to step back to make space for women in the movement. So that was really, really important to share. Thank you. I think I'm now going to turn over to Fred to share some of his experiences.
I think it's really great how he just said that the men have to step aside from being leaders once things are established. At times, I think we have to move from leaders to mentors in this process, in workplaces, in other places that we get the opportunity to open the door. So I think I had the fortune to be able to create the website to create the International Criminal Court. And it was kind of the beginning of the .com era. Through that, I think some UN I guess community started to work with me on a Millennium People's Assembly initiative. They had an intern with them, and she wanted to intern at my .com company, or internet consulting company, Net Reaction. I had an all young men staff, and at that point, so I was really happy to welcome a young woman to our team. It was the beginning of the internet, and computer devices and policies weren't really established. The young men began to share pornographic images and expose them in the environment. So this, of course, poses unsafe environment for, or the feeling of an unsafe environment for people. And so I was immediately basically called a meeting to address this issue. We wrote up a formal, along with a discussion, we wrote up a formal employment manual for the company. It was very new. But I think, you know, that's part of unwrapping the onion of gender, is that there's a lot of things, you know, a lot of things. I think the term, and one that's very hard to kind of avoid because of your training, might be mansplaining. Um, that's a very tough one to speak about. It's very hard when you're starting a company, because women have done a lot of paid work. I think it's very hard in startup companies to get women. There's volunteering, but at the start of companies, there's a little phase where basically people earn a thing called sweat equity. And it's very hard to have women kind of pursue an idea despite the personal costs to end up with what you would call the equity stakes in the company. So those, of course, in the unicorn companies grow into quite large fortunes. Most of them don't. So it's a tricky instance, but you know, that has to do with risk taking and unpaid work. That's a culture that's, you know, in technology it's very difficult to change. They find in universities, if women are in the technology programs, more men persist in that. But even though we are increasing our graduates in technology, of women, they tend to leave the field fairly quickly. So because of these predominant environments. So Man Up campaign, we have these cultural elements: gender, sports, music, art, reflection, and technology. And we hope that people get in mixed gender teams and do a project, hopefully a project that takes on the SDG most important, and that they use the gender lens, which I think is a great term. I've been reading, you know, more on foreign policy and economics because I'm on the Finance for Development Committee for Finance for Development, and we make the recommendations to the ECOSOC professionals that put together the Finance for Development report, you know, that stems from the Addis Ababa agreement. But, you know, it's really important because both gender and climate are a new type of international relations theory. And it starts from, you know, looking at individual circumstances instead of the power politics of war, which is a very incomplete view of human security, you know, the realist point of view. So I think it's really valuable to have people that are educated in feminist theory, thinking about vulnerable people, thinking about what security means. I think, you know, Ambassador Chowdhury's introduction of the SCN 1325 is really important: women, peace, and security, because security is education and school and food security to women. Men automatically go to the military and policing aspect. And so these are things that really have to be really shifted. And at the UN, you know, this is a policy and research community and network. So when you have an opportunity here, it's great to look in and look at the final conclusions, and really like start to bring that gender and lens and also the youth lens, because in economics they're discounting the future of, you know, the young people, and especially the most vulnerable. So, you know, the CSW is a great opportunity. I think a lot of the young people that are leading this organization, in 2016, we had an opportunity, uh, kind of introduced by a man, you know, on the staff of the that got into the staff of UN Women and was advocating for youth. Didn't do it all that ideally in some aspects, but we were able to create a CSW Youth Forum with Ori, who leads CSW NGO, and Safira, and and a whole number of youth organizations. But we did that because, you know, I had 100 youth delegates from 24 countries that we took to the World Cup to do projects, mixed gender projects in their countries to stop gender-based violence. And I think I didn't see a CSW that was very welcoming to young people, or that they could find the track or the people or place that young people, young men, young women could participate. But I think, you know, this approach, how these especially this last two, you know, CSWs have unfolded, has been, you know, the tech savviness of young women, kind of leading the way, especially in the pandemic emergency, to virtualize this conference. And, you know, I don't know how many people, you know, were in the CSW, but it was a record by far, because of this, you know, the team that's hosting you's efforts. So, you know, I'm really appreciative. You know, we educate each other all of the time. There's a mentor learns as much from being a mentor as having that. So, you know, I welcome any opportunity to do this, and we just need to keep on like getting people into these rooms. There's a lot of rooms here at the UN where there are not women, are not young voices, or that there are not men that understand the gender perspective, and how valuable it is in, you know, every area of finance, economics, technology, and we are and need to reconstruct and deconstruct the culture with the tools of youth culture. And if you can pull, you know, if you can always take somebody with you, it doesn't matter it's a young woman or a young man, always try and take somebody with you as you do things if you can, because that's what will keep somebody breaking that new ground throughout the life cycle of their employment, of all the volunteer activities that they do. So we really need to, you know, build allies with this type of awareness. Men are not perfect. We don't unwrap all the layers. You know, it's very hard to hang in there, because sometimes you'll get kind of skewered for things that maybe, you know, you didn't set up or whatever. But I mean, that's just part of the territory. You know, women on a daily basis, you know, face consequences for things that they had nothing to do with. So guys, also, you have to hang in and kind of be tough, and, you know, maybe even, you know, have your reputation lost. But you're the one that knows what cause you made. You need to reflect on it when somebody's saying things to you where you could improve, and not get defensive, and, you know, and just resolve to do better if you've kind of, offended, held back, or created a structure that's viewed as, you know, um, inequitable, not inclusive, not creating opportunity, or even perpetrating violence. So it takes a lot of reflection.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Fred, especially about the different levels and layers within this movement and what it takes to be a male ally, and how it can be a personal struggle to stand up shoulder to shoulder and support the women in this movement. And I know we are an hour in, so we're towards the end of some of our questions. And I think my final set of questions would, again, to be our speakers and also to Safira and Devin, if they'd like to jump in, is that we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and we've talked a lot about that in this call as well, about how it is important to stand up as allies and share power. But how do we really and truly encourage this allyship and distribution of power? What are the tangible steps that we can take to ensure that this is happening? And second is that if you have a favorite resource on male allyship or gender equity, whether it's a book, a movie, or training, whatever that inspired you, if you would like to share that with attendees on the call, that would be wonderful. So I'll kick us off again with turning over to Carlos, if you could share some of your examples or experiences.
Of course. So this is a great question. Many, like we all speak about diversity, inclusion, gender equality. We must be equal, but what we do about it? Like everything ends up with just words. As we say it in Spanish, las palabras se las lleva el viento. Words fly with the wind. So what does it mean to actually be an ally and not just talking about diversity and inclusion and gender equality and all of that? What are we actually doing to be effective and productive when we are an allyship, when we are an ally in the feminist and the gender equality movement? In my personal experience in my space, I have created platforms, not just in my country, but internationally. I have had that opportunity to do so. And for example, the international platform was thanks to the Young Leaders and Young Professionals program, thanks to CSW New York. They were kind enough to help me out when I started the international voluntary. And when I created this platform, when I created these movements, we have to understand that when we talk about human rights, for instance, that's my field, human rights. When we talk about human rights, when we talk about gender equality, we need both sides of the coin, not just one. So when we talk about human rights, we need 50% men, 50% women. Or in other cases, we need women, men, and people from the LGBTQ+ community. We need all those points of view because we all need to settle down an agreement of what we can do to actually reach gender equality. It's not just talking about it, it's actually reaching for it. So every time for example, I create an event, I try that my events are always as diverse as they can. We have women, we have men, we have young people, we have people not so young. We have people from the LGBTQ+ community. We try to give this platform to everyone. It's always an open door for everyone to share experiences, to start a debate, because that's what we want. That's what I want, to be honest. I love a good debate, but always in the line of respect, because it's always good, not just to see the point of view of the author, but also try to put in the shoes of the author. For example, in order to understand the gender equality and feminist movement, you have to understand why women are fighting for it. In order to do that, we as a man, we have a privilege. And people always say, Carlos, we're in 2022, men doesn't have privileges anymore. Like we're equals to women. No, it's not. Because if I go to the streets at the 3 a.m., I feel safe. Of course, if I don't go with my phone, I feel safe. If I go with my phone, I don't feel so safe. But if I were a woman, doesn't matter what I have. If I am a woman and I am in the night in the middle of the street, I will fear. I will be trembling. It will be a terrifying experience because anything can happen to a woman in the night in the middle of the street. We have privilege because we are safe. No one will come to us to rape us, to kidnap us, to sell us. That doesn't happen to us. It happens to women, it happens to girls. That's a privilege out there that we can feel safety on the streets. We know, as you know, I think what Richard was the one who said it. We are not facing the fact that people who see us as a sexual toy or as a sexual thing, you know? Like we don't see that, we don't fear that. We don't fear that kind of thing. We never get the kind of comments that comes with, oh, it's because you dress up like that. You just look so handsome. I just have to say it. No one ever would come to us like that. But try to be a woman. Try to be a woman. And you can dress as a man if you want, if you're a woman. And you still will have this kind of comments. It's because you dress so sexually, so hot, so beautiful. We are safe, ladies and gentlemen. Men are safe. And that's a kind of privilege that is huge. Because if I feel safe, women should feel safe too, you know? And the fact that women have to go together to bathroom because it's really dangerous to go alone to a bathroom. Can you imagine that? Being so insecure that you cannot even go to a public bathroom alone. Can you imagine that? I mean, that's what I am saying. We have to be in the shoes. We have to put the shoes of women. And that's when you learn, that's when you understand why we are privileged and why we need actions right now. Because we need a society that understands that women have their own struggles. And that those struggles for us men are privileged because we don't have it. For example, we don't need to pay more for engineering products. Women does. We can pay a good pay. Women can pay less for the same work. Men feel safe around other men. Women doesn't. Men are not easily to get raped, sexual assault, or kidnapped to be sold to other countries or to other people. Women does. If women get pregnant and they don't want it, it's a huge problem. Men, you know where I'm going right now. You know where I'm going. Men doesn't even have to care to take care of the children. He can just fly away and it never existed. I mean, that's the kind of thing we have to think about. And that's why it's important for us to put on the shoes of women, to put on the shoes of girls, to put on the shoes of the LGBTQ plus community, because we don't see that. We don't live that. And as we don't see that, we don't live that, we need to hear that. We need to listen to them. We need to listen to the woman who has experienced the kind of action. We need to listen to the people, to the human being who has been harassed, who have been pushed down, who have been sexually harassed, who have been raped. We need to hear the stories and understand that they are human beings. Once we do that, everything comes so clear that you know that we need a change on this society in order for women to feel safe and to be treated as a human being, because this is what it's all about. You can just put it all together and resume with just one simple sentence. Be treated as a human being. That's all. And when we understand that, we can go forward, actually, to be honest. And to answer the other questions, there are really many good, because sometimes it's really boring to read books or to find some investigation or research on feminism and human rights of the women, the girls. I understand that. I get it. Not many of us are the kind of type to read a whole investigation about why women are equal to us. I mean, that should be logical. But there are some movies that we can actually see on our favorite stream media. I mean, there is, for example, Ocean's 8. I love that movie. Legally Blonde is actually a good movie to understand the fight of women into college. I mean, who hasn't seen Legally Blonde, and has seen Reese Witherspoon and has that, oh my God, that girl is so dumb. And when we see the movie, we are like, oh my God, she's not dumb, she's a genius. How brilliant is that? That's how you can understand the struggle right there. They're not dumb, they're brilliant. It's just that we as a society see them as dumb. It's just, and there are, for example, there are movies like Wonder Woman, and I would actually, Wonder Woman is an amazing movie to understand how strong women can be. I think Wonder Woman is a character that was built up to understand how women can be just a superhero as any other man, and how they can be so powerful by themselves as an independent being. And there is like bad mothers. I don't know if that's the name in English. In Spanish, it's malas madres, but I translate that as bad mothers. A movie where a group of mothers are just tired of the life being a mother. Their cycle of life being the same, taking care of the children, going out to the store, waiting for the husband, and then one day they decided to leave it all behind, put the children on the care of the husbands, and just go out to take a party. And the movie is so great because you can see that because they took one day, everything went to hell. Everything, it started to be a mess. When the women were not around, the house were a mess, the kids were rebellious, the husband didn't know what to do. Those are great movies to watch and to understand the struggle of being a woman in the 21st century. So, and to finish up, because I know I talk too much, just to finish, I think I would like to give an advice to those who are wanting to go forward as being an ally. You don't need to be a leader to be an ally. You don't need to be a feminist to be an ally. You don't need to have a space to be an ally. You just need to look, the smallest details, the smallest change that you can do, it will be the best. I mean, it will create a huge butterfly effect that will impact on society. The simplest things, just as understanding that the woman alongside you, beside you, is not a sexual toy, it's not a victim, it's just a human being as powerful and strong and independent as you are. That's everything you need to do to be an ally. You don't need to go, oh my God, I will study, I will have a PhD. You don't need that. You just need to understand that we are human beings, that we are equals, and that we are all independent, strong, and that we are all brilliant in our own simple way. So that will be my advice. And I really want to thank the GLGP for inviting me today. It was such an honor. Thanks, Aida, Safira, Devan, and everyone else. It was really a true honor to share this platform with all of you, with Richard and Fred. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. It's always an honor having you. And thank you for speaking about the importance of active listening. And I love how we're having resources shared in the chat, from policy papers to recommending pop culture movies like Legally Blonde and Wonder Woman. Love the diversity of resources and inspirations available here on this call. I'll turn it over to Richard next to wrap us up a little bit and share about any further resources or about how we can truly shift that power.
Yeah, thank you very much, Saida. I think at this point I need a Carlos in my life. I need your energy and your excitement and all of that. I have sent you a LinkedIn request. Make sure you accept that. But basically, it's I am more stuck to the papers and policy recommendations, but I'll definitely watch out the movie recommendations. I shared one resource, first of all, because this resource is actually something that I'm going to start working on in my new role. And it's basically, a research paper done by the Yield Hub, that the Action Learning Group now, on the gendered experience of youth participation and leadership in sexual reproductive health and rights. And this paper actually reveals a lot of, some of the challenges. And when I was actually reading this research, I can identify myself as a male and how much privilege I have had growing up. The fact that I could do so many things, and now looking back, I realized my friends, my female colleagues could not do that, not because they did not want to, but society and culture had put in place several impediments in their way. And so if you if you put all of us on the same level, I could definitely develop faster. I could have more opportunities that they would not have access to. And this shows that there are systematic and institutional barriers that are preventing women in many ways. And that is the reason why it's important that as male allies, we also read and understand some of this, challenges of women and understand our privilege and the role we play within this. Because whenever there is a privilege, it means someone is benefiting. And if the one benefiting is not recognizing and acknowledging that, then the one who is not having opportunity will continue to suffer. And so I guess, you can all have a read through. If you are interested, you could also follow up with me, but I will be leading an action learning group made up of funders, implementers, advocates to discuss some of these challenges, but most importantly, how donors can begin to put in place processes and policies to address some of these concerns. For instance, if you are a donor and you are providing grants to a youth-led organization in Venezuela, and in your grant, you are not making room for professional development opportunities for young women who are volunteering, then you should know that you're actually contributing to, some of this oppression that women face. Because first of all, if I volunteer to be part of an organization, I may not take home a salary, but then my parents will not worry because I'm a male, I volunteer, I leave the house, I have fun, I do work, they're happy. But compared to a female, if she's not doing housework and she goes out and is volunteering for an organization that's not being paid, it's even an incentive for the parents to say, then you rather stay home and not work and do housework because you are volunteering, you are not getting paid. And so again, it just shows how we the males keep getting more opportunities and then it doesn't reflect the same way. So it will be a good resource to go through. And to finally sum up, I would say for what we can all do, I would only suggest some practical measures that we all can do here. If you know of any male in your life, whether a father, a husband, boyfriend, or even a brother, they may be at a stage where they've not started yet to even consider allyship. Explain to them that you have a privilege, you have a power. You've not even maybe understood that yet. You have a role to play. So explain to your brothers, your colleagues, that these are some of the little privileges that you have. And so from today, sometimes it's just good to step back and allow me. It's not because I don't want to take the lead, but basically these are some of the reasons why. And I think a lot more men would want to be allies, but not a lot have also taken the time to know how their actions, their inactions is actually contributing to this. And there are also some who are emerging, like I was emerging some years back, but I found the opportunity to be engaged in more spaces and resources. For a discussion like this, you could have invited a male colleague just to even listen in. The recording will be available. I guess you can also share it, or even if you have a resource, share with a colleague. And for those who are more established and practicing like myself, who are in the field and reinforcing using our privilege, it's good to always remind us when we are also making decisions that pause. Make sure you are given this opportunity to a young female. Make sure you are given this opportunity to a female who is volunteering and is not paid. Because just going home with this opportunity could mean their parents will allow them to participate more, to progress more, and to see that, yes, there's more worth with their work. And so it's good that we are all reminded. And like Fred mentioned, that sometimes, for men, we behave, when we are with our colleague men, we behave in a certain way because they expect us to behave that way. And so we kind of have some attribute because we are with our colleagues. But then come and see us maybe with our partners or even among other people, and we're just being ourselves. Sometimes we don't even know our left to right. But we have to man up because society says man up, show some power, authority, And so it's just important that we demystify all of these different social constructs. But most importantly, when we all leave, let's talk to male allies within our homes, families, and relationships, and let them acknowledge that you have a role to play, and that if you are quiet and when things are happening, then you are actually contributing to the problem. So speak up when your colleague friends are saying things that are not supposed to be said, correct them. Don't say, yeah, boys will always be boys. It's not boys will always be boys. They are being not right. And so always tell them it's either you are speaking against it or you are part of the people oppressing me, the one you love or the one you consider your brother, your sister, or partners. So basically, that will be my end. But please do read the paper and reach out if you have any questions. And thank you, Saida, for definitely inviting me to be part of this.
Thank you, Richard. I dropped the resource you shared in the chat again and really appreciated you talking about the personal sphere of influence, how each individual connection can even play a big part in making sure that we can bring people within this allyship space, even if they're not fully sure about it or have not considered it. So I really appreciate you being here and talking about your experiences and sharing those resources. And finally, I turn it over to Fred. Fred, if you'd like to share any resources that have helped you that you would think would be wonderful to share with the other young people on this call today, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I think that there's a very important thing happening, through one of the UN organizations, the International Labor Organization, and so there's things that shape our societies, and law and policy are one of them. So ILO has a new convention, C190. I think maybe 5 or 6 countries have been able to ratify that now. So conventions are a model document, to set out, in this particular one, to stop sexual harassment and gender-based violence in the workplace. It's a really amazing law that
I am okay, like as long as I'm having medication.
convention that would help all in the workplace, defend their rights. And I think the difference between kind of fighting for your rights as far as off each instance, having to sue in the United States for equal rights, instead of actually the organizations and structures and of society and law, when it's adopted in a rights-based policy, that means that the organization has to set roadmaps and action plans to start to address, these inequalities at the deepest level. So, equality, inclusion, opportunity have to have like plans and be built into budgets. So it's important to, if your country hasn't the laws that as the United States, we don't have the Equal Rights Amendment. So on a case basis, women may find themselves fighting for equality in the workplace, fighting. Recently, there was a little progress potentially in stopping things being forced into arbitration, but it's really important to pass this convention. So contact your, national legislatures and say that this should be part of the agenda to pass this convention, and then it has to be incorporated into national and local laws. So this is some action that everybody can take in their home countries. So find out about ILO C190, and then in your workplaces, the same thing. It's important to set policies and lay down those employee handbooks and insist that they are there, or look at them, read them, see if they really actually facilitate, gender equality, inclusion, opportunity, because, things like that create a level playing field for you to really try and then have a fair shake in your employment, place of employment, because that's a very important realm where we need to change, and model gender equality, inclusion, opportunity. So I think, those are the formal structures. And again, the other Carlos and Richard spoke about these personal aspects, but just because there's a law does not mean that it's followed. And so, it's still very important that we become cultural hackers, that we're able to reshape, whether it's a song or literature or film or any area of human endeavor. We need to apply, these human principles, and the youth and gender lens is so important to apply to culture. So really think about, that we have an exercise that we use as an icebreaker of G-Smart, where we say, oh, what's your favorite sports figure and what attributes do they have? What's your favorite music figure and what attributes that they have? And, you put them up on a flip chart or something like that. And then, you say, well, what are the attributes of a real man? What are the attributes of a real woman? They'll list some of these same factors, and then, they'll end up on both sheets. The same qualities, the same, courage, compassion, the ability to teach, the ability to inspire. These things are human qualities. They're not gender qualities. And so then, that leads into, the creation of projects to address some of the inequalities that we see in our society using, your talents. So, go out and hack the culture with, fun projects and, very serious things like working on policy and law. And I think, those two, I think working between the two will allow you to make, the biggest impact over your life. And, really be allies and friends and colleagues with each other. Really try and be, hard on the problem, really be gentle with the people. That's really one of the keys to success. Really try and get people to, come up with a common set of facts and let them understand, you may be in these 10 situations, be putting a story on something. So don't put stories on people. It's very hard to understand people's motivations. And you see, you do better by really trying to create ways forward and create value instead of, labeling them this way or that way. Because they tense up and then they react or they backlash. So it's really good to sit on the same side of the table and try and create value. And then if you get to a place where you've got a good solution, try and create situations, where there's a verification that can be understood, neutrally. So all of these, I think, are really good methods in negotiating and changing things, but really, yeah. And then the other is, this work is very hard, and it's really important to reflect and refresh. You have to go and feel what you felt, process that, write it down, whatever your reflective practice. That's one of the G-Smart things. Really reflect in the way that you reflect, and then refresh yourself. Find the activities that nourish you, and make sure that you take the time to do those so that you can keep yourself healthy, on balance, and doing this over the long term. So it's really important for all of us to be here, to be able to take care of mental health, as well as your physical health.
Thank you, Fred, for emphasizing not only that legal and law and policy piece, but also that piece about holding each other more gently and recognizing that we need to, in this space, especially take care of our mental and physical health, especially with the burnout that's prevalent in the development sphere. And again, like Devin mentioned, really love the term cultural hackers. I'm going to use that. I like the idea of youth especially jumping in and really reshaping the narratives and hacking the culture to provide those shifts in power. And again, thank you to all of our incredible allies and speakers for speaking their truth, sharing their experiences. And today, we just love to wrap up this call by hearing from our attendees and hearing from my fellow co-chairs about what can men do to be even better allies? We've heard from existing allies on this call about their experiences, their thoughts, but to wrap us up, we'd just love to hear from some women on the call today too about what can, in your experience, men do to be better allies, where there's room to build greater capacity, or what your experiences have been about men being the allies that you needed in your personal or professional career. So I see that Grace already has her hand up, so I'll give the floor to you, Grace. And if anybody wants to share their experience in the chat as well, you're welcome to. Over to you, Grace.
Personally, I think that, I'm assuming there's an echo maybe. But I think that really allowing space for men to listen and comprehend what activists in this space, especially activists that identify as feminists or identify as female or non-binary or anything that is really not white male, I think for the most part, is having the space to talk to men who are attempting to be allies, and for the men to listen and absorb is really essential. I think that there is a lot of space as well where men will say, oh, I believe in equal rights, or I believe in feminism, and never do anything more than just state that, not take action on their words, which I think is very hard, because words aren't gonna change anything. Just because you claim that you are in support of women's rights does not mean that in your day-to-day life you are standing up and for the women in your life who are being disrespected, or women in general who are being disrespected. And so I think like men sitting down, I think one of the most essential steps to starting this type of process is having men who are allies sit down with women that they know, or people that they know that identify as feminists, and listen to their experiences and their hardships and their inequalities, so that it becomes an issue on a more personal level.
Thank you for sharing that, Grace. And we have some comments in the chat that are coming in, so great, please keep sharing. I also see that Kit has her hand up, so Kit, over to you.
Yeah, I want to agree with Grace, and I also want to point out that it's really important for men to also give space for women to speak. Like, I've had experiences where I'm on teams that are male dominated, and I've had a lot of men like not listen to me or try and speak over me, but I've also had experiences where men take the time to actually listen to what I have to say. So I think one of the most important things is for men to open up that space and make sure women's voices are uplifted.
Thank you, Kit, especially sharing that piece about uplifting female voices. And now I think we have Rakshita who would like to take the floor. Over to you.
I completely agree with Grace and Kit both. I wanted to add a point that I've personally, experienced that has really moved me in a lot of places, which is, I think it was brought up by one of our panelists as well, is that men often act around other men, how they see their peers act. And that's a very strong influence, especially when in groups. And I've strongly felt that that is one place where male allies can actually, have a slightly stronger footing. It takes a lot to step out of your peer circle and be like, this is the thing that we're discussing. Or let's say the women or the person that we're talking about, I don't think we should look at her or them in this regard. Or that I think this is, this conversation, I don't like where it's going, or I don't like this train of thought. And it's more often than not, I've seen people be like, I don't genuinely resonate with that, but I was a part of that conversation, and I felt that was okay because I was not participating actively in it. But I feel like being part of, just participating even passively in such conversations, it sort of lets those conversations become normal. become normalized in our society. So I feel like actively stepping in places like these, and maybe, you know, a lot of times out of our comfort zones, even as like, I feel like even as women, a lot of times, sometimes we just, you know, we feel like maybe it's a conversation that's just going on. I don't feel like I'm actively participating in it. So yeah, there are places that I feel like even in today's current social, political, economic makeup, if we put our foot down in a certain places, we'll be able to make a lot of significant change, have mindsets changed in not one conversation, but let's say if I have 3 such conversations with my peers, and every single time there's one person who says something might register. So yes, that.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up, and the importance of not dismissing these as passive conversations or passive comments or microaggressions that don't have an effect, because they do. It's like those little things that chip away at you, at your confidence. And then you look at the bigger picture, you realize that how it's perpetuating those stereotypes and perpetuating those harms that are being done to us. And the importance of really putting yourself out there and have those difficult conversations with your friends, your colleagues, and your brothers, your fathers. So thank you for lifting that up. And next we have Irene, who has her hand up.
Okay, I also totally agree with Grace, and then Kid, also Rakshita, with their points. I have this very interesting perspective, I guess, that I would like to share. So I joined like a training about tackling gender-based violence, and there's this speaker. He told us the origin of the patriarchal culture, and that is because like a long time ago, humans, they used to move from one place to another, and then because women have wombs, they're considered too late or like too bothering, and that's why the men will always walk in front and the women will always follow, and that's where patriarchal culture begins. And it's just kind of like stupid. I'm so sorry if I use that term, if the reason is like that, and it's still used until today, where men are where men are the ones who are allowed to be the first. They always need to lead, but women are not allowed, and so on. So I tell my friends about the history of where that patriarchal culture comes from, and I hope that can make sense in their logic, and I hope that can make them change their perspective towards women, because strictly speaking, who is asking God to be born with a womb, right? It's just who we are, and their mothers, their sisters, their older, younger sisters, they're all born with wombs. So like I hope that can relate to them in a more personal level, and I hope that can make them understand and appreciate the position of women as well. And I've ever watched a social experiment where men are asked very difficult questions about women, like what are you going to do if you're raped? What are you going to tell your husband, or something like that? It's from the UN Women, and I think that's a very interesting thing that we can do maybe in our universities. And after the experiment, the men really reflect on that experiment, and they say, oh my God, I just realized it's very hard to be a woman, and I will respect their positions more next time when I go out to the outside world. Yeah, so that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene, for especially being about part about how our biological makeup should not predetermine how we are treated in this world. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think next we can hand over the floor to Tisha.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to highlight that I think it's important to educate our young men, since it's important to help them understand, since they are the future, they will be the change. And sometimes it's also easier for them to notice and understand differences and new perspectives. So I feel the older male generation finds it a little hard to see a new perspective. However, if we focus on the young men, the generation that is coming in, I feel like we will be able to affect greater change. I also believe sometimes there are men who do want to help. I've seen this in my own communities, where there are men who do want to help, they want to step in, but they just don't understand how to. So as women, if we could lead that change and highlight spaces they could step into, so they can be more effective allies. So that would also help. And the last thing I would like to say is that strong parenting plays a huge role in the kind of allies men do become. If you've noticed, at least I have, that men who have sisters and are close to their sisters, they are usually at the forefront of this movement. Not all men who have sisters, but some. And when the parents create an environment where the children are equal, no matter their gender, you notice this taking much more seed in those homes. So I feel like a combination of educating young men, us creating a space for men to step in, and stronger parenting will help us have stronger allies and further us in this movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha, for talking about the personal element of also bringing in our family members and our friends into the movement. And I think we can wrap it up by calling on our next speaker. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Alperen, you have the floor.
Yeah, it is pronounced as Alperen, so it's okay for you. It's a Turkish name. I'm from Turkey. Hi, everyone, and it's so nice to see you all. And I also thank a lot to all of you who stand up against gender inequality, especially those allies standing up here. I just like to mention that Keisha stated that we need to educate ourselves, and it reminded me that in the Middle Eastern paintings and classical paintings, women always trying to explain something to men once you look at them. So thinking that we should learn from these paintings, and we should learn from that woman as well, and from the historical part and from the present part as well. So basically, I'd like to also mention that feminism, I do identify myself as a feminist, and I'd like to highlight that feminism is not just what pop culture presents, but it has a history, and it dates back to Julian of Norwich, Kristen de Pizan, and so many beautiful women, amazing women, intelligent women that stand up against patriarchy back in 13th and 14th century. And we are still saying that it is something that is pop culture presents. No, I completely deny that. And I'd like to mention this in this platform as well. It has a history, and it doesn't end there. We have Mary Wollstonecraft, we have Margaret Cavendish, Mary Shelley, Hypatia, and many amazing women from whom we can learn lots of things, from social sciences to history, sociology, psychology, because they are the fundamental minds that that is set today as science, let's say. So basically, to wrap up, I'd like to say that it has a history. Feminism is a history, and we have to protect it by being allies, while transmitting it to next generations, and while creating a bridge between old and younger generations. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for wrapping us up so beautifully and just bringing those ties together of how feminism isn't some sort of new age Western construct, but it has existed across societies, across cultures, across the globe, of women from all over the world standing up and fighting together to build a better and equitable place for all of us. So really appreciate that. And thank you all of our speakers again for joining us. Thank you to all of our attendees for speaking up. Thank you for all the people in the chat who jumped in and shared their resources, their thoughts, their ideas, and also a lot of networking going on, which is a big component of the space. So again, thank you all for being here and joining us. And to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the coming weeks, I'm just going to turn it over to Devin to close us.
Cool. Yes. Thank you everyone for contributing to this conversation. I think it was really great. And there were a lot of really great insights. So our next event is 1 week from today, same time, same place, 12 to 2 p.m. And we're going to be talking about anti-racism. So be sure to register for that. I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, and this website down here has all the information about the prep series. We have 2 more events left, this anti-racism one, and then an elevator pitch workshop happening on March 9th. So be sure to check that out on our website. And I'll also put some links in the chat for connecting with us through our Slack channel, through our mailing list. Yeah, so don't be a stranger, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, Devin. Thank you everyone again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye all.